You're looking good, and it feels good to be with you today. Hello, I'm Kel O'Brien Hunter, author of this book, Consider My Servant Job, and this is News with the Eyes of Faith, where I talk about news from the perspective of Christ and the doctrine of Christ. No opening theme song, no merchandising. I do not sell bobbleheads. This is just me, you, and the truth. So, well, item number one, Donald Trump was sentenced in the felony, the trial, and there's no penalty, and the judge wished him Godspeed. I think this was a fair result. This was a clearly politicized process. They could not impeach him once. They could not impeach him twice. They took him to court to get that label of felon attached to them. That didn't work, and they did the assassination attempt. Okay, it's all part of a system, and you've read about it in the Book of Mormon. Let me repeat that. Just read the Book of Mormon, the Book of Helaman. Reread David A. Bednar's talk about in the space of not many years in General Conference about what's going on. There's no confusion. I brought that up in my ward. I said, hey, the Book of Helaman starts with a disputed election and a political assassination. There's some chuckling, written for our day. Let's move on to the next topic. Biden is still president. 9 days left in his presidency, and does it feel like whomever's controlling Biden's meds is sabotaging Trump's presidency? These pardons, just pardoning everyone on death row or whatever it was, banning future oil and gas drilling just days before Trump's sworn in. The Daily Mail from the United Kingdom talks about this. You remember back when George W. Bush won, how what they did is they went to the computers, they pulled the W letter off the keyboards. No, we're not doing that. That's a college prank. This is something worse. The country's being sabotaged, whoever's controlling President Biden's meds. Every conspiracy theory is true. In an interview with, I think it was with the USA Today, Biden talks about how he didn't intend to run for president in 2020. Biden casts doubts on his fitness to serve another 4 years just a day before his terms end. USA Today, I'll put a link to it. The link I have is the Courthouse News. I don't know, Biden responded when USA Today Washington Bureau Chief Susan Page asked if he had had the vigor to serve another 4 years in office. Biden and Page sat down at the White House on Sunday for a president's rare interview with a print publication because he can't do these interviews. His brain is mush, and this is elderly abuse is what's going on. Biden, 82, talks about how he didn't intend to run for president in 2020, but he says that when Trump sought re-election last year, I really thought I had the best chance of beating him, but I also wasn't looking to be president when I was 85 years old or 86 years old. But I don't know. Who the heck knows? So far, so good, but who knows what I'm going to be when I'm 86 years old. Okay, you're not, with mental acuity, it's not a set state. It fluctuates from day to day, from hour to hour. Did we just get the truth? Your friends who voted for Biden have to answer for this. You love them, you care about them, but they need to answer for this mental acuity, which we all saw. We all saw it 4 years ago, 5 years ago. We were told that we were in denial. No. Okay, every conspiracy you thought was conspiracy theory was true. Mark A. Thyssen from the Washington Post had an article called 10 Worst Things Biden Did in 2024. Number 6 was cognitive decline. For me, that's number 1, because if Biden isn't in control, who is? That's the question, is who's really running the country? The road ahead. Rush Limbaugh used to say, no victory is a complete victory. No loss is a complete loss. And what's your game plan for post-Trump America? We have 4 years to get things going. What's the long-term game plan? The nurturing relationship. I got a lighting problem. So we're going to... a little bit worse. I'm just getting that Beatles effect where I look really red now. It was snowing this morning, so had some nice diffused lights. Let me get this going. But what's your game plan for post-Trump America, where he's term limited out of a third term? We have to come up with something. This just doesn't happen. We have to make some decisions. We have to look at ourselves. We have to find the leaders. Who's the next governor of California? Um, Not Gavin Newsom. Not with the state on fire. Now, I'm not doing any fire stories. It's the chaos of a catastrophe, the fog of war. So always donate to the church's humanitarian fund, the Red Cross, Salvation Army, Goodwill, these reputable sources, don't get scammed. You know who the people are that you can trust. Who's the next California governor? Are they going to need to draft Arnold Schwarzenegger again to rebuild Los Angeles? I don't know. I vote in Utah, so I have no say. I'm just expatriated. But yeah, what's our game plan for leadership? Who's the next president from our party? Who's getting prepared and getting taught the ropes? Secretary of State, J.D. Vance. Yeah, we have to think about that. Just don't get caught up in the euphoria. You celebrate, but we got 4 years to get our act together. Prime Minister Trudeau resigns. The trucker rally in Canada, that's what did it. Road Ahead Part 2. The Church News mentioned that 9 members of the church are in the U.S. Congress from Utah and Idaho. So California, you have plenty of members of the church in California. I don't know how many temples. I lost track after 7. Yeah, California, you need to step up to the plate. We need a member of the church as a governor. We need some stuff from California, and you want to flee to Utah and Idaho because of the situation there, but you can take a stand in California. But it's interesting. All the members of the church are all Republican. Now, I sustain the first presidency letter. Merely voting on a straight ticket or voting based on, quote, tradition without careful study of candidates and their positions on important issues is a threat to democracy and inconsistent with revealed standards. See Doctrine and Covenants 9810. That's from the June 1st, 2023 letter. I sustain that. I'm from California. So I went from California to Utah from one-party rule to one-party rule. Just different parties, and the danger is you get groupthink. And we need to nurture. We need to have some good Democrats to be a mollifying force, a moderating voice on the extremism. But here's the question. How do you build a bridge to a political party that supports abortion, euthanasia, and puberty blockers? You're right. How do you do that? Really think about that. You got any ideas, post in comments. Let's generate some ideas right here. We've had a national day of mourning for Jimmy Carter. I'm grateful for his work as governor and for Habitat for Humanity. I think he did a guest appearance on Tim Allen's show, Home Improvement, once. Completely support that. He did damage this country. People were hurt. They lost their jobs and their lives. I remember the gas line. I remember double-digit inflation. I was alive then. Hostages in Iran. That's a little kid. That's where I started seeing the flags being burned in the Mideast. He enabled a lot of radical Islam. And don't bear false witness about that just because he's passed on. Orson Scott Card, Speaker for the Dead. When you deliver a eulogy, you tell the good and the bad. You're honest about that. This is also a lesson on leadership. Governor of California and who's going to be our president after Trump. Lesson on leadership. You have a leadership vacuum. Go watch The Magnificent Seven. So it begins with there's this Indian who needs to be buried, and the gang that controls this town doesn't want it to be buried. The Undertaker has a problem because he needs to bury this person, but he can't bury him. So finally, Yul Brynner steps up, and Steve McQueen responds to his leadership, and that's a lesson. Speak up. That's what I'm doing. I'm providing some intellectual ammunition and a conceptual framework within the doctrine of Christ for leadership. I'm certainly not in a financial position. I do have a minor in political science. If someone wants to pay for me to get a Juris Doctorate, I'd be willing to do that. But right now, someone else may be better. Someone else who's more charismatic might be able to do this better than I could, but someone needs to stand up. We need to have a replacement, especially in California. These fires may flip the state red. I don't want to be crass about a human tragedy. Paradise, California, Maui. Los Angeles. Okay, these things did not just happen. They're the logical outgrowths of certain environmental policies. And people are dying. And they're suffering like they did under Jimmy Carter's presidency. And we have to be honest about that. Freedom from Religion Foundation dissolves honorary board and spat over trans issues. This is from Religion News. They had this honorary board, and Richard Dawkins and Jerry Coyne and psychologist and linguist Steven Pinker resigned over transgendered issue. Now, it's interesting. Richard Dawkins, his argument is that you have a certain DNA, you're XX or XY. And so there's no dispute about what your sexual identity is, what your gender is. It's right there, you're hardwired into your DNA. Coyne said that he found the foundation's behavior bizarre. Quote, I find it strange that an organization that is so pro-science all of a sudden is acting in a quasi-religious manner, suppressing dissent, calling out blasphemy and heresy by censoring those people who go against their preferred definition of woman, Coyne said. Once again, this is double standards. Yeah, I'm for free thought and diversity, except when you're a heretic. And it's a compartmentalization problem, is that you get emotionally attached to being for science, but also the need for community, orthodoxy to have community, the unity and community, the orthodoxy plus freedom of thought. Those are at odds. That's that model I've been talking about, feelings, fairness, and friends. That's what's going on. That's what you're seeing is the silencing of dissents. This is also a little bit of the Trump effect, is that, it's with Facebook as they're dropping the DEI policies, is that, you had DEI died, in about 4 years, especially what it did to the arts with Star Trek and Star Wars. That's where a lot of the anger comes from, is from the arts. You had the Fembusters, Ghostbusters, but these online movie critics, the Critical Drinker, Overlord DVD, Jesse Grant, you have some of the other ones that I follow, that criticizes that they are Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who. These sci-fi classics went hardcore DEI, and audience just hated it. They ruined the franchises. I couldn't believe that Star Wars is dead. Star Trek is dead. We had the reruns. You had the Next Generation. You had all those expanded universe books. And Star Wars are now considered legends and not canon. In my mind, legends and canons are switched. Canon is now legend. Legend is now canon. And go back to the old school stuff. Salt Lake Trib is having a panic attack. I may talk about that in a later broadcast about Marvel, Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who. I'm not a Whovian. Just because it's a mini series, it's hard to follow the series over so many episodes. I'm for like smaller episodes to get it done there, and because it's a serious investment. But I'll talk about it in another broadcast, hopefully. Salt Lake City Tribune panic attack. You have two headlines. Gordon Monson, quote, LDS Church. Can we use the correct name of the church? We can't, can we? LDS Church education boss should put down the hammer at BYU and pick up an olive branch. That's an editorial. And here's another one. Dark Days. New rules have BYU professors running scared. Peggy Fletcher did a video about it. They're starting to clamp down, and I'm glad they did. As an alumnus, I was having some issues with BYU's feeling like it's getting a little bit lax. I read William F. Buckley's book, God and Man at Yale, and I saw some of the patterns going on that Buckley described going on at BYU. Now, BYU's board of directors are prophet seers and revelators. But as an alumnus of BYU, Bachelor of Arts 1995, History, minor political science, GPA 3.54. Yes, I'm a graduate of BYU Provo, that is. I was disturbed at some things going on at BYU. Cougar Tales, those are really unhealthy. But I feel like there's stuff going on, and the blowback from the President Holland gave the Musket hoax talks. He gave this talk, and people thought he was telling members of the church to get muskets and kill LGBTQ people for some reason. No, he never said that. And the fact that you believe that represents a problem. But you've always had a problem with holding professors accountable to church standards at BYU. And this may sound counterintuitive, but I'm talking from some experience I may talk about. I may weave it into some of the fiction I write. But from the book, BYU School of Destiny, page 298, 299, there's a book written by Ernest Wilkinson called BYU A School of Destiny. And it's written at the centennial of BYU. So we're coming up with the sesquicentennial of BYU. In 1975, this book was published about BYU history. They make the point is that back in 1934, you had a lot of BYU professors not paying tithing. Full 25% of the BYU professors, a quarter of the BYU professors were not paying tithing. 39% were part tithe payers. 36% were full. Yeah, imagine you're a BYU religion professor not paying tithing. PhD high priest, and he's not paying tithing. That'll bother you. That we can keep this game up. You don't have to follow church standards, and you still can be fairly employed at BYU. Back in 1996, we had the issue of Brian Evanson publishing a book called Altman's Tongue. I don't find cannibalism entertainment. There's ways to depict cannibalism as it's described in the Book of Mormon, and we talk about that. The cannibalism is mentioned in the Book of Mormon, but it's done in a context, and it's not done to glorify. It's not done in gory details. Watch the horror films from the 1930s to the gore and slasher films of today. There's a big difference. There's ways to address these issues, but without titillating and stimulating people and creating appetites for satanic things in people. Is BYU bad for your testimony? Well, it may have been. It depends upon what you go in and what comes out with it. There are people who lose their testimony at BYU. There's that one lady I used to follow, and just gets repetitive. Does Deseret Book enable apostasy? Well, I hope they can monitor the situations and make sure that we as consumers of the education at BYU, and that education is a product we buy, something we get, but it's also we're entering into a contract. We sign a contract, we pay tuition. That's a consideration, and losing your test to have your professor criticize the church. That's a violation of their fiduciary responsibility, and it's also a breach of contract. So here's a letter. This is in the Salt Lake Trib. This is the dead ventriloquist I talked about a little bit later, is that what happens when someone wants to make a point, what they'll do is they'll put words in the mouth of another person, like a ventriloquist, and they'll take a dead person. This person would have, if he were here, he would say such and such. And it's a way to warp reality. It's a motivational technique. It's invalid. Letter regarding BYU's restrictions for its faculty. It seems Joseph Smith might have agreed that the spirituality of education is not about dictating ends, from Gail L. Porritt, Public Forum, from January 9th. After reading Peggy Fletcher Stack's and Gordon Monson's recent Tribune articles, and that's the ones I alluded to, on BYU tightening restrictions of their faculty, I'm reminded of a passage from Parker J. Palmer's To Know As We Are Known. And here's a dead ventriloquist. Palmer sounds to me like something Joseph Smith might have agreed with. And with the Joseph Smith papers, we know exactly what Joseph Smith thought about things. I don't know how many volumes there are. We can search them online. We can do a keyword search. That's fairly easy. But she's quoting Parker J. Palmer and putting Parker J. Palmer's words into Joseph Smith's mouth. And this is a persuasion technique, because you're emotionally attached to Joseph Smith. And you're saying what this person said, something Joseph Smith said, but that's not true. We know Joseph Smith said. He never uttered those. Now here's the quote: A spirituality of ends wants to dictate desirable outcomes of education in the life of the student. It uses spiritual tradition as a template against which the ideas, beliefs, and behaviors of the student are to be measured. The goal is to shape the student to the template by the time his or her formal education concludes. Well, isn't that what you're doing? You're trying to bend them towards the LGBTQ agenda. Puberty blockers on sacrament trays, drag queen prayer circles, pride flags everywhere. My response is always the free market. If you don't like BYU, you can set up your own university that's LGBTQ friendly, and use a model that works for conservatives with homeschooling. You can, if you're LGBTQ and you do not like what's being taught in Utah, you can homeschool your children. You can set up a charter school. You can set up a private school, and you don't have to coerce anyone, where you make it voluntary, a free market. Okay, you think BYU is too starch-colored for you? You can set up your own university and based on your values, and you'll succeed with your values with that. That's my approach. It's a free market approach. And we're at 20 minutes. So let me talk about this model, the feelings, fairness, and friends model. And this model I've been talking about, it helps explain why people are late. It got me thinking. I was at the hospital. I had this form I had to sign. Is that basically was a 2-paragraph legalese saying that I will show up to my appointments on time. We've gotten to that where you have to sign this document. I don't understand the legality of it, but it is a commitment. It's sort of a paper of intent. It's sort of soft legality that, yeah, I'm going to show up to this appointment on time. I'm not going to show up late because I'm watching on my phone or I'm detached from reality. And the reason why people show up late, it's the feelings. People are focused on, they want to get caught up in the emotion of things and they lose track of what's going on. They're being very inconsiderate of other people because you're basing things on your feeling. That's person relative. I'd also like to talk a little bit about cluster of characteristics. If you're like me, you've noticed something. People who vote Democratic tend to have a lot of ink, that is tattoos. They have a lot of piercings, or vegetarians, or pro-abortion, pro-feminist, pro-environment, pro-globalism. They're anti-gun, anti-war, and support are themselves LGBTQ and are atheist. Now, why is there this cluster of characteristics, and is there any commonality between these things? Now, I first noticed this back in the 80s. There's a commentator named Andrew Rooney. He was on 60 Minutes, Andy Rooney. And he wrote this in 2 of his books, and the idea stuck with me. He said, if you're for the Equal Rights Amendment, for abortion, and for gun control, if you're for one, you're for all. And they're all the same thing. But why are they connected? What's the connection? There's a conservative rabbi named Daniel Lapin. He talked about this too. I read it in his book called America's Real War, but he also talked about in his this talk that I have a link to it called The Severed Flower, Conservatism Without God. This was given to the Heritage Foundation. And he talked about this cluster, and he really noodled it over, and it resonated with me because I'd done the same thing. He basically said the commonality of all these things is that all these ideas are anti-scripture. It's okay to eat meat. We actually have a revelation in the Doctrine and Covenants about that. He who forbids to eat meat is not of God. Military. Joseph Smith, church leaders, served in the military. Lorenzo Snow is actually going to military college at Oberlin. They served in the militia and the military. Globalism versus Americanism. Book of Mormon, America is a promised land, the Constitution mentioned in the Doctrine and Covenants. This is hardwired into our theology. Essentially, these ideas are anti-scripture. Now, some of them are good ideas. Of course, we have a global view about things, and we want to eat healthy, and eating a lot of meat, that can be unhealthy. You always need to add more vegetables to your diet, and it depends upon your physical condition with diabetes or weight loss, what have you. But they're applied in a way that are actually unbiblical, like egalitarianism. Let's say you treat everyone the same, but are men and women really the same? You read these stories. I was reading the story in the Deseret News about women tend to have more PTSD than men. There's an episode of SEAL Team Season 2, and one of the episodes, it's the one where they have the girl who is a Jihad Jannah. And at the beginning, they have a discussion between 2 of the characters. Davis, who is the sort of the operation, who oversees. She's sort of the Chloe character. They have the CIA person. They said, "Hey, well, are you just giving her a pass because she's a girl?" And Davis, who was in the Navy SEAL, she said, or in the Navy, said, "Look, I joined the Navy when I was 19. I was fully accountable. This girl went jihad when she was 19, and you're saying, oh, she doesn't understand what's going on." Well, yeah, that is a double standard. So, SEAL Team with David Boreanaz. SEAL Team Vampire. It's getting rough. It's starting to get more TVMA themes, so I may back out of the DVDs. Here's another thing, but why the atheism? Well, Scripture is God's words. It's interesting. You talk with people, they'll say, well, I believe such and such, and other person said, well, the Scriptures say such and such. Those are 2 different sources of authority. They're not equivalent, because a person can have wrong beliefs. Back in 2012, they're voting on the Democrat Party platform, and you had this Methodist man. He wanted to add God and Jerusalem to the platform. Remember, the anti-Semitism on the left. Okay, Biden turned a lot of Democrat Jews into voting for Trump because of the anti-Semitism issue with the Palestinian. That's a great accomplishment. Like I said, I want to have healthy political parties on both sides, and members of the church can be a transformative factor in the Democratic Party, moderating factor. But they tried to do that, and I have the video, and you watch it. Is that this Methodists want to add God and Jerusalem to the platforms. They put it to the vote, and as you listen to it, the delegates there clearly did not want those things in there, and so the moderator, he's sitting there, and so I had this lady had to whisper in his ear, and so what it is that he put it to a vote 3 times, and he knew 2 things: is that the members didn't want this, but this is really bad optics to be anti-God and anti-Jerusalem. So the party is anti-God, anti-Jerusalem, but the political party overrode the will of the party. And that's the 2 things going on there. This wasn't democratic. Think about the superdelegates. There's a reason why Republicans don't have superdelegates, because the superdelegates in the Democratic Party make sure you get the right outcome. So they look like they're being democratic, but make sure they wrote the right way. Atheism. Robert Bork talked about this in his book, Slouching Towards Gomorrah, that the left focus on egalitarianism and individualism, or what I call fairness and feelings. Egalitarianism is fairness. You treat people fairly. You treat men and women the same even though they're not. Gender is something optional because you feel a certain way. The autonomy, individualism is based on feeling. And the reason why they're atheist is that God does 2 things, is that he disrupts egalitarianism. You also have that God is certainly an unequal person. He's above us, and that's why people want to tear God down. You get this coffee with Jesus phenomena. You have the lay and the clergy creates a non-egalitarianism, also this idea of chosen people, which is common through all religions. I think probably not in Buddhism, but certainly Christianity and Islam. In Judaism, you have a sense of a chosen people. Also in the Soviet Union, the new Soviet man, master race and Nazism. You also have distributive justice, where you have to you can't get to heaven unless you obey the commandments or you follow the rules of religion, and people just want to have a religion without rules because that'd be unfair, distributively unfair, where conservatives focus on the procedure. This is procedural justice. You're getting a fair procedure that's uniformly applied to everyone. So heaven's open to everyone. Heaven is open to everyone so long as you follow the rules, whereas the left says heaven's open to everyone no matter what happens. Also, commandments encroach upon personal autonomy. You follow your own heart, follow your own arrow. All we like sheep have gone astray. Section 1, following the image of their own God. Whatever I want, autonomy, I get, and you don't care who gets hurt. So it's a handy model. I hope you're paying attention when you're interacting with your friends. That's going to help you deal with your friends who are on the left. Make sure you're reaching out to them. I sent an email out to a friend of mine, haven't heard back from him, but the hand is always outstretched. And, your friends, you see these awkward conversations because they know you're conservative. They lost badly, both the Electoral College and the majority vote. There's this Trump effect of undoing the DEI at Facebook. DEI killed Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, the MCU. It's destroying all the entertainment. It's people who like the entertainment. They're getting mad. They just decanonized Star Trek Discovery. That's pretty impressive. Well, we're at 28 minutes, but there's a lot of news, and that's news with the eye of faith, so keep your eyes open. Thank you, and have a good weekend.